My wife married me for a bet, but then I changed everything. The laughter from the next table was loud, boisterous, and a little too familiar. Ethan Hayes, 29, sat nursing a lukewarm beer at a dimly lit bar, trying to ignore the group of loud, obnoxious frat brothers. He was celebrating, or rather, trying to celebrate, a promotion at his architectural firm, but the noise was grating. Then, a name, spoken with a sneer, cut through the din: Ethan Hayes. The bet's on him. The cruel bet. His blood ran cold. Ethan, a man who preferred quiet evenings and intellectual pursuits, was suddenly the unwitting subject of their drunken amusement. He strained to hear. The voices belonged to Mark and Derek, two of the most insufferable, arrogant guys from his college days, now apparently celebrating something themselves. And with them, sat Emily, 28, a woman whose beauty had always been a quiet, devastating force. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her smile, when she directed it at Mark, was dazzling. He listened, his heart sinking with each word. Mark, with a smug grin, recounted the details of a ridiculous bet. They had dared Emily to tame the quiet genius, to make Ethan, the notoriously reserved and awkward prodigy, fall in love with her and marry her within a year. The prize, a significant sum of money, and bragging rights. Emily, seemingly unfazed, had apparently accepted the challenge, confident in her allure. Ethan felt a sickening lurch. He remembered Emily's sudden appearance in his life a year and a half ago. Her charming smiles, her unexpected interest in his work, her playful teasing that had somehow broken through his guarded exterior. He, the man who had always been wary of grand gestures and overt flirtations, had been utterly captivated. He had fallen, completely and hopelessly, in love. And 6 months ago, he had married her, convinced she was his soulmate. Now, the world tilted. Every shared glance, every whispered word, every tender touch was replayed in his mind, poisoned by this cruel revelation. He felt like a fool, a pawn in a disgusting game. The promotion, the celebration, everything vanished under the crushing weight of betrayal. He slipped out of the bar, unnoticed, the laughter echoing in his ears. He went home to their perfectly decorated apartment, a place that now felt like a stage for a lie. Emily was asleep, peaceful and beautiful in their bed. He stared at her, a burning pain in his chest. How could he have been so blind? The next few days were a waking nightmare. He moved through his life in a daze, every interaction with Emily feeling like a fresh stab wound. Her bright morning greetings, her innocent questions about his day, her tender touches, each one felt like a calculated performance. He couldn't confront her, not yet. He needed time to process, to understand. And a cold, determined resolve began to form within him. He would not be the punchline of their joke. He would not be a victim. He started observing her with a new, clinical eye. He saw the subtle flickers of emotion he'd once dismissed as endearing quirks. He saw the casual way she would glance at her phone, sometimes with a faint, secretive smile. He remembered her easy charm, her ability to win over anyone. He remembered her initial enthusiasm for their wedding, almost too enthusiastic. A different game. Ethan, usually so open with Emily, began to withdraw. He offered vague answers about his day, kept his phone on silent, found excuses to work late. Emily, at first, seemed puzzled. She would ask if he was all right, her brow furrowed with what he now perceived as feigned concern. He simply offered a tired smile and a noncommittal shrug. He began to subtly change his own behavior. He started dressing differently, opting for more stylish, modern clothes instead of his usual comfortable, slightly disheveled attire. He paid more attention to his appearance, groomed himself meticulously. He took up boxing, finding a grim satisfaction in the repetitive, disciplined movements, building his physical strength, matching the hardening of his resolve. He also started to actively pursue his career with a renewed, almost ruthless, ambition. He took on more challenging projects, volunteered for presentations, networked tirelessly. He excelled, driven by a quiet fury that he channeled into his work. His colleagues, who had always respected his talent, now saw a sharp, focused drive they hadn't witnessed before. Emily noticed the changes. She commented on his new clothes, his late nights. Her questions became more frequent, laced with a subtle anxiety. "You seem different, Ethan," she would say, her eyes searching his. He would offer a polite, distant smile. "Just focused on work," he'd reply, the words flat and devoid of warmth. He saw the confusion in her eyes, then a flicker of something else, a challenge. The huntress in her, he realized, was awakening. He was no longer the easy target, the predictable genius. He was becoming something else, something she hadn't anticipated. He started inviting colleagues over, hosting small, professional gatherings at their apartment. Emily, ever the gracious hostess, would shine, her charm on full display. He watched her, a quiet observer, noting how easily she captivated others. He also noted the subtle shifts in her attention, the way she would subtly gauge his reactions, his level of engagement. She was still playing a game, he realized, but the rules had changed. The shifting sands. His success at work grew exponentially. He landed a prestigious international project, a massive undertaking that would require him to travel extensively. He announced it to Emily over dinner, his voice calm, almost detached. Her fork clattered against her plate. Her eyes widened, a genuine shock registered on her face. Travel, for how long? She asked, her voice tight. A few months, potentially longer. It's a huge opportunity. He watched her carefully. Her initial reaction was not one of excitement for him, but of disruption to her plan, her comfortable routine. A few weeks later, as he was packing for his first trip, Emily approached him, her face unusually serious. Ethan, she began, her voice soft, I miss you. We never spend any time together anymore. He looked at her, his expression neutral. I've been busy, he stated, simply. He saw the flicker of frustration in her eyes, quickly masked. She was losing control of the narrative. The predictable, adoring husband had vanished, replaced by a driven, somewhat distant man. The rules of her game were becoming fluid, and she was clearly unnerved. He started subtly introducing new elements into their routine. He would suggest spontaneous weekend trips, not to romantic getaways, but to remote, challenging hikes or minimalist cabins. She, the woman who loved luxury and comfort, found herself pushed out of her comfort zone. He watched her struggle, then adapt, surprising both of them with her resilience. He began talking about abstract concepts, about philosophy, about the complexities of human nature, pushing her to engage on a deeper intellectual level. She, who had initially played the part of the interested listener, now found herself genuinely challenged, sometimes even fascinated. He saw a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes, a hunger for understanding that went beyond the shallow pursuit of a bet. The cracks in the facade. The shifts were slow, almost imperceptible, but they were happening. The laughter from the next table that night, the cruel words of the bet, still echoed in his mind, but they were beginning to fade, replaced by a new, more complex reality. He was no longer just the victim of a bet, he was an active participant in a silent, transformative process. He was changing her, and in doing so, he was changing himself. He noticed moments when her guard would drop, a quiet sigh when she thought he wasn't looking, a genuine concern in her eyes when he worked late, a small, involuntary smile when he made an unexpected joke. These were not calculated performances, these were glimpses of something real, something unscripted. He started to see beyond the initial betrayal. He saw the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior, the subtle anxieties that sometimes surfaced, the quiet moments when she seemed genuinely lost in thought. He began to understand that her desire for control, her need for affirmation, stemmed from something deeper than just a manipulative game. He knew she had a troubled past, a difficult relationship with her parents, a deep-seated fear of being seen as less than perfect. He had dismissed it as background noise before, blinded by his own infatuation. Now, he saw it as a contributing factor to the person she had become, a fragile shield against a world she perceived as constantly judging her. His anger, once a raging fire, began to cool, replaced by a strange mix of understanding and a reluctant empathy. He was still hurt, deeply so, but he also saw a woman who was herself trapped, perhaps by her own insecurities, her own need to prove something. The unspoken confession. One evening, after his return from a long work trip, they were sitting on their balcony, the city lights twinkling below. The silence was comfortable, a stark contrast to the initial awkwardness of their marriage. He had spoken about his trip, his successes, his challenges. She had listened, truly listened, her gaze steady. Ethan, she began, her voice soft, almost hesitant. There's something I need to tell you. His heart clenched. This was it, the confession, the moment of reckoning. He braced himself, his jaw tight. When we first met, she continued, her voice barely a whisper, it wasn't what you thought. She paused, took a deep breath. It started as a bet. A stupid, cruel bet with Mark and Derek. He said nothing, simply met her gaze. He watched the raw vulnerability flood her face, the shame, the regret. She wasn't avoiding his eyes. She was meeting them head on. They dared me to make you fall in love with me, to marry you, she confessed, her voice trembling now. And I agreed. I wanted to prove something. To them, to myself. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. I was so caught up in it, in winning, in proving I could do it. She looked away, her voice cracking. But then, you changed everything. You weren't what I expected. You were kind, and smart, and you saw things in me no one else did. You challenged me, you made me better. She turned back to him, her eyes pleading. And somewhere along the way, the bet stopped mattering. I truly fell in love with you, Ethan. I really did. He felt a complex mix of emotions. The betrayal was still there, a lingering ache. But beneath it, a profound relief. The truth, finally, was out. And her confession, raw and unprompted, felt genuine. He saw the depth of her regret, the sincerity in her eyes. This wasn't a performance. This was the real Emily. A new beginning. He reached out, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. He squeezed them gently. I know, he said, his voice quiet. Her eyes snapped to his, wide with surprise. You know, he nodded. I overheard them at a bar, just after my promotion. The night I proposed to you. He watched her face crumble, the shame overwhelming her. It hurt, Emily, more than anything. I know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I should have told you. 100 times. But I was so scared. Scared of losing you, scared of ruining everything. He looked at their intertwined hands, at the city lights twinkling in the distance. The pain of the past was still there, a scar that would always remind them. But beneath it, a new possibility, a fragile, hopeful beginning. You did change everything, Emily, he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. But you also changed me. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. He saw not just her regret, but a newfound humility, a willingness to be vulnerable, to be truly seen. The woman who had started their marriage as part of a cruel game was now stripped bare, vulnerable, and more beautiful to him than ever before. Their path forward would be difficult. Trust, once shattered, was not easily rebuilt. But they had the truth, finally. And in that truth, in her raw confession and his quiet understanding, there was a chance. A chance for a marriage built not on a bet, but on a love that had defied its deceptive origins, a love that had slowly, painstakingly, changed everything. The silence on the balcony was now a quiet promise, a shared understanding of a future they would build, one honest step at a time.